on 22 years since the 9/11 terror attack, gathering at Ground Zero in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, in Washington, and in cities and towns across America. 22 years ago today, nearly 3,000 people lost their lives, thousands injured, in the worst attacks against our homeland in American history. This day, for so many Americans, is always such a tough day. We all remember exactly where we were when the plane struck. We remember the tragedy, the anger, the uncertainty, but also the heroism and sacrifice demonstrated by so many. Like the first responders, police, firefighters, the passengers of United Flight 93, and our brave service members, many who were inspired to join the military following the attacks. Just ahead, we'll be joined by Army Ranger veteran Sean Parnell, who enlisted in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. And also on this day, we must remember the Benghazi terror attacks, which unfolded on September 11th, 2012, when the Islamist militant group Ansar al-Sharia attacked the U.S. diplomatic outpost and CIA annex in Benghazi, Libya, taking the lives of Ambassador J. Christopher Stevens, Department of State employee Sean Smith, and CIA contractors and former Navy SEALs Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods. We'll also be joined in moments by the Benghazi hero, Mark Geis, and a great friend to myself and Don Jr., a member of the Annex security team who is credited with saving dozens of lives during this vicious attack. And sadly, we mark these tragedies years later as a country in crisis and with a commander-in-chief who is simply not up to the job. And Joe Biden is facing backlash for choosing to spend today in Alaska instead of New York, Washington, or in Shanksville. Why is the President of the United States not present at any 9/11 memorial site today? Now, Vice President Harris instead was sent to New York, raising even more questions about why Biden would be a no-show on such an important day. But after Biden's disastrous trip to Vietnam, it's sadly more and more obvious why the president's handlers are trying to keep him out of the spotlight. Here's just a small sample. Watch.
Let's see. I'm just following my orders here. Staff, if anybody haven't spoken, I ain't calling on you. I'm calling. I said I have 5 questions. Anita, VOA.
Now, Biden's press conference was brought to a sudden end this weekend amid all of the rambling and all of the confusion. But as we spend today reflecting on attacks against our nation, it's as powerful of a reminder as ever that leadership matters. And that with every passing day with a commander-in-chief who is not up to the job, it is clear that Americans deserve better. Joining me now, 2 American heroes, Army Ranger veteran, host of the Battleground podcast, Sean Parnell, along with Benghazi hero, member of the Annex security team that fought the Battle of Benghazi, Mark Geis. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with me on the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kimberly.
And I know this is a tough day, for both of you and for so many Americans. So we're really feel privileged and honored to have you on the show. And again, thank you both for your service to this country and taking a moment to reflect and to never forget on what transpired 9/11, what happened in Benghazi. So Sean, I'm going to start with you. Can you just take a moment to reflect back on September 11th, how it shaped the course of your life and why it inspired you to enlist?
Oh boy, it's hard to believe that it was 22 years ago. I'll tell you that, Kimberly. It certainly feels like it was just yesterday. I was just a college kid, a sophomore in college at a small university here in Western Pennsylvania. I don't come from a military family or a long line of military generals, but I remember waking up in this rundown college apartment on this rundown college couch, laying flat on my back. And I remember having the hangover of a lifetime, sitting up. The world was spinning. There were crushed iron city beer cans everywhere. And I remember staggering over to the television set, turning it on, and watching it flicker to life just in time to see an airplane crash into the World Trade Center. And I mean, in that moment, I was shaken to my core, and I just remember sitting to like watching my TV set, just transfixed to those images of just raw horror as they engulfed our fellow Americans. I mean, so many things, Kimberly, affected me deeply that day. And it was, people falling from those towers and landing on the sidewalk and dying on national television, or people who were lucky enough to survive that fateful day stagger out of the wreckage covered from head to toe in that thick gray soot. You think you see were bloodshot eyes and the 1,000-yard stare. But really what affected me the most, I think, and what I think was the inspiration for me wanting to join the military and be on the front lines of the fight. I really did want to be on the front lines and part of America's collective response. I mean, I was just a young kid. I didn't really know what the hell I was getting myself into, but it was really the first responders, Kimberly. It was the police officers, it was the firefighters, or it was just ordinary Americans with no training whatsoever who, instead of running away from the flames, I watched one American after the next run headlong into them. And many of the people that stormed up the steps that day on 9/11 never came out again with their lives, in an act of selflessness that I had never seen up until that point in time in my life. And I just remember thinking to myself, how can I sit here and do nothing when ordinary Americans are given everything? And I was raised in this country. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, was taught to love this country. But the reality is by and large, my childhood, we had never really been attacked. It was by and large a time of peace. And I often wondered what my moment was going to be, or was I going to ever have the opportunity to serve something greater than myself? And I got that opportunity after 9/11, and I got the opportunity to take the fight to the enemy. And looking back, I don't regret that for a second. I'm proud of the service, and I'm proud of the service of my men and I in Afghanistan, for sure.
Absolutely. And Mark, hi.
I
Good to see you. Always to talk to both of you, but these are very, somber circumstances and just in reflection. But I don't want us to ever be afraid or not want to talk about it, so that people learn from history. We learn about leadership and what it means to be an American and a patriot and to serve the country. This is, of course, the same day as the Battle of Benghazi. What do you want your fellow Americans to understand about that day, in the context of the 9/11 attacks and how we view our government and America's mission abroad and around the world?
really, I think what it boils down to is we need to remember that decisions that our politicians make have consequence on American lives, both military, civilian, and anyone else that's serving, those that serve in any one of our intelligence agencies, State Department, and they really need to think about that, and it's bigger than just what you see up front, the behind the scenes that is going on that affects people for years to come. Ambassador Stevens, Sean Smith sacrificed their lives for this country, and they weren't gunfighters. As a gunfighter, as a private security contractor, as a military, infantry, or special operations, we understand that the threat that the threats that are against us when we go into combat or we go into harsh areas to serve this country. But our civilians don't always understand that the same as we do.
Right.
And our politicians are making decisions every day to this day, even with what's going on in Ukraine, that is putting lives at danger, and they need to be held accountable by us if that is what we the people want to have happen.
Mm-hmm. It's so true, and we see that failure of leadership, the consequences of having someone in the White House and an administration that puts America last, the conflict and what's going on in Ukraine, all of the money being sent from this country to subsidize that war effort. It's disturbing to say the least. And Sean, given that failure of leadership that we're seeing on the world stage, that everyone is seeing, what message are we sending to our enemies, and what risk is there of another attack like this? And I thought about this today.
Yeah, and it's a fair question, and certainly it's a message of weakness. And let me just say to Mark, I I know what it's like to be overrun. We were almost overrun in Afghanistan multiple times, and I have to say, and it's fate almost, or God or whatever, that I'm on this show with Mark today. But really watching what happened at Benghazi as it was happening, I had already been, I was wounded in Afghanistan and already home, but it was what happened there that really shattered my faith in government. I mean, because like I have to say that when I was a young kid, I told you I was 20 something when I joined the military. I didn't really know what the hell I was getting into. After 9/11, they roll out the Patriot Act, and I'm like, oh yeah, the Patriot Act. It's called the Patriot Act. It's probably a great thing. The reality is, looking back now, it sure as hell wasn't. And now
Right.
I've learned that basically anytime they name a bill, it's basically the opposite. The Inflation Reduction Act, actually, that's not true. The Affordable
Right.
Care Act, actually, it's the opposite. But when you saw Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Susan Rice all talking about that tape, and I'm like, that is complete BS. They are lying to the American people, and it really just opened my eyes. And it gave way to all of these crazy things that happened. I mean, obviously, the Patriot Act gave way to the spying on President Trump's campaign,
Yes.
which gave way to this massive surveillance state and domestic operation to surveil American citizens, which gave way to a censorship operation, which now here we are at a point in this country where we're trying to jail our political opponents. And Joe Biden is the commander in chief and is at the helm for all of that. So, you see Joe Biden, he's obviously weak on the world stage. His trip to Vietnam was an absolute disaster. He's basically an animated corpse. And I hate to say this stuff on 9/11, but you can't,
It's true.
it's important to remember what happened on 9/11 and never forget the fallen, but also the lies that we were told by the government in the wake and the aftermath are something that is also important for us to remember. And because, as Mark said, accountability is important. Inextricably linked with 9/11 is the war in Afghanistan. We surrendered in Afghanistan over 2 years ago, made possible by terrible decisions of our commander in chief, Joe Biden, and the White House, who completely abdicated his responsibility. And Kimberly, not a single damn person with stars on their shoulders has ever been held accountable for that to this day. And not only has no one ever been held accountable, Mark talked about Ukraine, and by the way, he's 100% right. These people are advocating for a more dangerous war in Ukraine when there
Yes.
are still Americans trapped on the ground in Afghanistan, and nobody's been held accountable. And so, I look at everything that's unfolded after 22 years after September 11th, and you're right. I feel like this country is portraying weakness on the world stage. I feel like there's really no leadership at the top,
Yeah.
and basically many of the Republicans are focused on all the wrong stuff and that's why I love President Trump. He seems to get it, and he's laser focused on peace and fixing this country.
No, you're absolutely right. And Mark, a lot of Americans, they don't quite understand the links, the nexus between the attacks on September 11th in 2001 and the attack against the embassy in 2012. So what does the American public need to understand about this?
Well, first and foremost, the attack on September 11th, 2001 was led by Al Qaeda. And we have been able to, through open source, trace back that the attack on our consulate in Benghazi was by the leader of Al Qaeda. And that's after, what are we looking, 11 years, almost 12 years of fighting Al Qaeda. And the leadership is still there, giving orders and directing threats and terrorists against American citizens. And, it's unfortunate, Gaddafi was not a good guy, but at the time that he was overthrown, he was operating in our behalf, going after the terrorists and the training camps that were in Eastern Libya, controlled by Al Qaeda, who were training training terrorists to go in and attack our troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then for him doing that, then because of the change of administration, we have Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama deciding that, we want to kill him. Why did they want to kill him? That whole operation was, in my opinion, for Hillary Clinton to try to show that she could put together a coalition force that could go after somebody who they wanted to deem as a bad character and not helping America, just so she has that foreign policy win when she was going to run in 2016.
1,000%. You agree with that? I'm going to get your opinion on that, Sean, because I think it's a very compelling point.
He is 100% right. I mean, there was a time where we built the very first combat outpost in Afghanistan in 2007. There were 300. We caught 350 enemy fighters crossing the border, trying to overrun our position before we could build it. We ended up catching them on ISR, basically like surveillance predator up in the sky, and we killed all 350 of them. But when we did our sensitive site exploitation, we found that they had pack mill Frontier Corps ID cards, but every single weapon that they were carrying was fresh off the assembly lines from Iran with Iranian serial numbers. So Mark is 100% right. And this is back in 2007 when we were at the height of the war in Afghanistan. And it had been going on for darn near 10 years after September 11th, 2001. And Mark is exactly right. Deposing Gaddafi had disastrous consequences because, as I always say with foreign policy, and this is why the legacy of 9/11 is so complicated. I think it's important that we obviously recognize and never forget the fallen. Always remember the people who rose up to fight for this country and thereafter and did their duty to defend this country. Remember what the government did, but also all the foreign policy failures, whether it was deposing leaders in Libya, what happened in Benghazi, obviously an absolute tragedy made possible by empty suits in Washington, to Syria, to Egypt, to even Iraq, where when we abandoned Iraq, we created a void there, which gave rise to ISIS. So Mark is 100% right. I mean, I completely agree with everything that he said.
Yeah, it's we have to be honest about what happened, and like you said, you put it eloquently. Never forget, and about the people that rose up and that showed heroism and patriotism and self-sacrifice in the most unbelievable way. But you got to learn from it. You got to honor that sacrifice and those people that did that by being honest about exactly what happened, who's to blame, who should be held accountable, who has not, and what is the origins of it, and what are the origins of Benghazi and what went on there. And by the way, the aftermath of Benghazi and seeing Hillary Clinton sit there and lie and not give a crap about anything or anyone in the most sickly, narcissistic, like just depraved thing I've ever seen. It would be tough to stomach that. I quite frankly don't know how you did it, Mark, but I want to ask you kind of a similar question because like last spring, we saw a third embassy close under Biden. We see Americans being abandoned and still being abandoned in Afghanistan. How did we get to this point with one embassy after the next closing, compromised safety in very serious, geopolitical areas around the world?
I think the whole debacle in Afghanistan with that pullout, a lot had to do with Ukraine, because there was no way the American public would let us be in Afghanistan and go back into Ukraine, helping them and spend that money there.
Wow.
So I think that's why the decision was made to push forward and not do what should have been done, not do what President Trump had planned and have a extended pullout with barriers or with check marks that the Taliban had to reach. And the fact that we pulled out of Afghanistan, out of an airport that is indefensible. I mean, it sits in downtown Kabul. Though it's only, I think, 3 to 5 miles from the embassy, it would take you over an hour to get there if you were trying to drive. When you had the most defendable piece of property in all of Afghanistan controlled by the U.S., and that's Bagram Air Base. That piece of property, that's the last piece of property the Russians pulled out in 1981. That's where they left from. Alexander the Great, before he pushed into what is now Pakistan, but India territory up into the Hindu Kush, back thousands of years ago, was Bagram Air Base area, because it is the most defendable. And instead of listening to his military leaders, he chose those that are going to be empty suits, empty uniforms that would only say what he wants them to say. And that's, we have to get rid of a lot of these generals. I mean,
terrible.
I go back to World War II. After World War II, we had a standing army going through World War II of millions of people. There were like 5 4-star generals. Today, there are over, I think, 24 to 30 4-star generals. Why do we need that? We don't.
Well, how many of them are even worth the stars they wear? I mean, give me a break.
Exactly. And, and we need to get our business squared away here. And it was on the way with President Trump. And what we've seen since is a complete 180-degree turn in foreign policy, in increasing our war efforts around the world instead of making peace and prospering here at home and taking care of the American people.
Yeah, it's really true. I want to just talk about how you guys have seen, ordinary kind of become extraordinary in moments of chaos, in moments of turmoil. Despite the direction we see the country heading, what still inspires you about the resolve of the American people, and what direction do we need to go and take this country? What would you like to see in the specifics in terms of foreign policy, national security, that is going to make Americans more safe, take care of our country, our military, our people? And I'll start with you, Sean.
Well, boy, that's a very difficult question.
Big time. It's like a college exam question, thesis.
I feel like a Miss USA have to answer a question.
And you're like,
well,
world peace.
Here's how.
World peace. That's what I always say. World peace.
Yeah, but you know what? I am going to go in that direction because
I was giving you a little a lead.
But well, when President Trump was on stage at CNN with Caitlin Collins, and she tried that very snide gotcha question, like, well, who do you want to win, Putin or Ukraine? And I just thought, like, what a ridiculously stupid question. And obviously they're trying to tie him. They're trying to tie him to Putin or get him to say something like that.
Again.
And she just kept pressing him with this dumb straw man question of, what do you want? What do you want? His response was like, I want people to stop dying.
Yes.
And
genius.
I thought that was a profound answer for a lot of different ways. And for me, as someone who's, and I'm sure Mark can appreciate this too. In fact, I know he can, but I just feel like I've seen enough war in 20 years of I've been at war in Afghanistan for 20 damn years. I'm 42 years old. So half of my life, like all we've known is war. Yeah. I'm ready to have conversations about peace. And part of me feels like, not part of me, all of me now feels like a commander in chief. Peace must be a first and foremost responsibility of the pursuit of peace. Not that freedom in this country aren't worth defending, because if this country were ever attacked or ever at risk, I'd be first in line to sign up to go fight. Doesn't matter how old I was. But peace is something. President Trump was the first real peacetime president that we've had in a real long time. And I have to say, I appreciated that about him.
Yeah, I think that should be the title of your next book. Conversations about peace.
Yeah, conversations about peace. Yeah.
Right?
Not a bad idea.
Well, you can show the strength. It's a great idea. You can show everything about what it means to be.
10% to Kimberly Guilfoyle. Yeah. 10% to Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Hey, I pick all the titles for Junior's books. Let me tell you something. Where you go and record the audiobook. He works me a lot. But you can talk about that and talk about being, military preparedness, military readiness, strong support for the troops, and having how about equipment and tanks and stuff to work instead of sending them to the Ukraine. But how to do that, which is more the Reagan-esque and Trump model than some of these other neocons and lunatics that, make the world less safe. Or that'll use war to be able to achieve their own political goals and, buff up their resume. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Mark, get your answer to that 50-part question that I posed to Sean. World peace.
I'm right there. It is world peace. I mean, it is peace through superior firepower, and it's not actually using that firepower. It is having the sense and the understanding, as well as having your enemies questioning whether or not you will or will not use it. They don't need to know that you will or won't, because right now we have a administration that it doesn't matter what weapon system that we have or what capability or how great our military is, they are not going to use it, period. They won't. You're not going to see it, or if they do, it'll be in a way that is going to be a failure. The one thing I loved about President Trump is no one knew whether or not he would or wouldn't. And that idea is far greater. Having that your enemies wonder will cause them more stress and more pain, and it'll keep them at bay far better than opening up. I mean, Joe Biden lifting up his dress and letting them see everything that's underneath and they know what's going to happen. Nothing.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that's, we need to take care of Americans, and we need to do that. We need to demand that as Americans, that don't let the politicians out there that are, and those entities out there that are trying to separate us, that are trying to show our differences and cause us to fight between one another, when truly we are the American people. The administration works for us, and it is up to us to come together to praise God, who has given us the power of the Constitution through our forefathers, that give us the freedoms to have and live in this country that is unlike any place else on the earth.
And always worth fighting for, just like you both have. Mark, guys, so where can people go for more information about you or projects, anything that you're working on? Pitch it now.
The best place to find me is at shadowwarriorsproject.org. It's our website, our nonprofit. We're faith-based. We're there to help veterans, help private security contractors, and our law enforcement, that all of those that are serving our country on a day-to-day basis and giving so much. Or you can find me also at markgeist.com. All
right, fantastic. And Sean, we know you got your fantastic show, your podcast right here on Rumble, honey, at the top of the hour. So 5 o'clock, what are you going to have on today, and what else would you like to pitch or promote? Since you both won, yeah. It was a tie in the beauty pageant. It was a tie.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness for that. Yeah, so
better looking.
So my show starts at 5 p.m. It streams every single night at 5, right after your show, Kimberly.
Yeah.
And I'm talking tonight basically just about the complex legacy of 9/11, and a little bit about what we talked about here, but also about the pathway forward and how the Patriot Act really did give rise to all sorts of unconstitutional things that we're seeing now. We're going to talk about the New Mexico mayor suspending the Second Amendment because emergency powers, whatever the heck that means, but really the pathway out of all that. So subscribe to my channel. It's Sean Parnell, Battleground Live, whatever. It's completely free. It always will be. But thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do that.
Subscribe to his channel, turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. I got this down pat, okay? I picture for Junior too. He loves it. He loves it. Well, you guys are the best. It's been such a pleasure. You know what? It made today a tough day. Just, a little bit more manageable to be able to talk to you and to do honor, to the men and women who fought so hard, the people who lost their lives, their family members, and those who really stepped up in the face of tremendous adversity and showed tremendous courage. Those that weren't not even first responders, or military or police, that really showed us what it takes to be one tough American. So God bless you both, because you're both that indeed, and both great friends.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thanks, Sean. God bless you.
Speak again.
See you, Mark. You as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just ahead, we have Ohio Senate candidate, the fabulous, the one and only Bernie Moreno, with the national security threat from the border crisis. So make sure you like and subscribe so you never miss these major episodes that we have here. And I'm keeping an eye on the live chat. So keep your questions and your comments coming, because it's all of you who make this show possible, along with our incredible sponsors. So please be sure to go check out the great folks over at Goldco, because gold and silver can protect your retirement savings from inflation and dollar devaluation. Because look, we all see the economic warning signs. They're real. They're out there. We see the banks collapsing. We see reckless spending. And I want you to be ready, because I'm ready. With Goldco, you can take action to secure and stabilize your portfolio. Roll over your 401k or IRA into precious metals and safeguard your savings, and you can do this tax and penalty free. From precious metals, IRAs, to direct purchases of gold and silver, Goldco has helped thousands of Americans place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And when you open up a qualifying gold IRA today, get up to $10,000 in free silver. Go to kimsmetals.com to learn more. That's Kims, with an S, metals.com. All right, we have live chat question real quick.
Well, I just wanted to bring you some breaking news directly related to what we just talked about. So Joe Biden has just made a deal with Iran. Prisoner swap and to release $6 billion in frozen Iranian funds. Doesn't go to Ground Zero, doesn't go to the Pentagon, doesn't go to Shanksville cuts a deal with Iran all on the same day.
So can you imagine on this day, this tragic and historic a day in the sense of how it's impacted this country, that the absent-minded commander-in-chief has now offended the whole country and really made us look horrific in front of the whole world by cutting a deal with Iran and released $6 billion? It's unbelievable. None of this is going to any of the events and what happened on 9/11 22 years ago. They're cutting this deal today. I don't know how tone deaf you have to be or how politically expedient and disgusting to do something like this. It's a complete horror. If the withdrawal in Afghanistan wasn't bad enough, if the border crisis wasn't bad enough, this should be enough to throw him out of office. Now we turn to more shocking developments surrounding the dangers of a wide open border. For example, in the state of Ohio, and this is a tweet from Senate candidate Bernie Moreno, an illegal immigrant late last night crashed into a school bus near Dayton, injuring 23 children and killing an 11-year-old. And we are now learning that that man, identified as Arminio Joseph, was previously caught and released at the U.S. border. And just next door in Pennsylvania, a manhunt is underway for a murderer who escaped from the Chester County prison outside of Philadelphia. But the story doesn't stop there, because 34-year-old Danielo Cavalante entered the United States illegally and was fleeing a 2017 murder charge in Brazil. He then entered the U.S., and prosecutors say that in April 2021, he fatally stabbed his girlfriend in front of her children. Now the manhunt is continuing around the suburbs of Philadelphia, but it is not clear where the fugitive may be at this hour. Here, for reaction to all of this, Republican Ohio Senate candidate Bernie Moreno. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me, Kimberly. You know, you have a lot of fans here in Ohio.
Oh, thank you. I love it. I've spent a lot of time there. I look forward to spending time there with you. So we got to get this done, because the American people deserve someone like you in office, and I know you will do tremendous things when you are elected. So thank you for being on the program. I know how deeply you care about these issues and what a wonderful family man you are. Your fabulous daughter, and now new son-in-law, all of the above. So we want more Morenos in the world. You know, we're seeing, really in real time, the devastating consequences of an open border every single day. First, tell us what you know about this bus crash in Ohio and the dangers of this out-of-control immigration policies we're seeing from the Biden administration.
Yeah, so Kimberly, you know the numbers. We're talking about almost 7 million people. It's a number that we have to process for a second, because it's hard to imagine what 7 million people is. It's, I live in a state with a population just over 11. So 7 million people have entered our country illegally since Joe Biden's been president. We have horrors all over the country. Ohio, which is far physically from the border, is basically a border state now. So imagine you send your little kids to school. They get picked up in a school bus and school starts. You're thinking, what's their day going to be like? I'm a father of 4, 2 grandbabies, 1 on the way. And you get a call. You get the call that every parent dreads. Every parent has a nightmare about. And the call is that the bus got hit by a car, flips over, injures 23 kids, and an 11-year-old is dead. And who killed that 11-year-old? An illegal immigrant, somebody who was never supposed to enter America in the first place. And what does Sherrod Brown do, our current extreme liberal senator? He says that the problem is that the bus didn't have seatbelts. Now, maybe that's a conversation about bus safety, but there's missing
avoiding
here.
The issues,
Avoiding the issue, and the press gives him a pass, Kimberly. The press doesn't even mention in any articles that he's an illegal immigrant. That's the state of America today. This is why we got to get this country back next year and win.
It's really true. And, just next door to you in Pennsylvania, there's a murderer on the loose who came into the country illegally, as we highlighted before. As a U.S. Senator, what legislation do you think you could propose and that people should support to stop this madness of coming into this country legally. It's a revolving door. People are recidivists, repeat offenders, and let out again to offend. And now this guy's on the loose.
Yeah, it's easy, believe it or not. This is easy. President Trump, of course, says that all the time because he did it. He had a safe and secure border. But we have to make it clear and reform our asylum laws so that if you enter our country at a non-designated port of entry, meaning an illegal crossing, you forfeit your right for life to asylum. You're immediately turned around. You enter the country, immediately sent right back to the other side of the river. If you enter legally through a legal port of entry, your asylum case will be heard, but you have to wait in the prior country until your case is adjudicated.
Exactly.
We finish the wall, and then most importantly, Kimberly, we designate the drug cartels foreign terrorist organizations. We work with Mexico and have them understand that we need them to help us wipe the drug cartels off the face of the earth. We use our military with their military to do that. The Mexican drug cartels are a clear and present danger to this country.
They are. You're absolutely right. And what are you hearing? I know you've been working very hard and how deeply you care about Ohio, where all your family is there. What are you hearing from the voters on the ground regarding this issue?
They're completely incensed. They don't understand why we have elected leaders right now in Washington, D.C. that are figuring out how to spend billions more money we don't have instead of actually solving a very solvable problem. You talked about Ohio and Pennsylvania. Let me go one more. In New York City, Kimberly, the Roosevelt Hotel, 1,025 rooms, completely occupied at $6,000 per month, housing illegal migrant families. And the hotel is owned by the government of Pakistan, the same government that housed Osama bin Laden. It's getting $75 million a year housing illegal migrants. This is insane. The people of Ohio, on average, don't make $6,000 a month, and yet that's what we're spending to house families here from another country that broke into our country illegally. I mean, they are absolutely incensed. We got to fix this thing.
And turning it over to Pakistan, that is such, I think, a very good example. That's that hits all the points, and it just really drives it home. Like, wake up, people. That's like throwing water in everyone's face to say, like, are you getting what's going on here? Do you understand the enormity of the problem and the complexity of it? But when you follow that money, then you're able to figure it out pretty quickly, like you explained for our viewers. You also released, which I think is excellent, a 5-point plan to stop the weaponization of justice so that we can focus on prosecuting actual crimes, which I care about very much as a former prosecutor and officer of the court. Lay out your plan for our viewers and listeners, please.
Yeah, Kimberly, you understand that America foundationally has to have rule of law. That's a blind justice system. Without that, we don't exist as a country the way we knew it. So there's 5 things that Republicans in Congress should be doing. No more strongly worded tweets or press releases. We need action. The voters don't elect us to go on Twitter and make forceful statements. That we elect our leaders to actually get stuff done. So number 1, we need to impeach Joe Biden, period. That we have overwhelming evidence. Certainly, if you compare it to Trump's 2 impeachments, it's not even remotely in the same hemisphere. We have to impeach him. Number 2, impeach Christopher Wray and Merrick Garland so that we can uncover the actual truth behind what's actually happening in our justice system today. Get all those communications. From being a prosecutor, you have discovery. Let's find out what's actually happening. Number 3, we have to make certain that there's not 1 cent of taxpayer dollar being used by the Biden administration to punish his political enemies, whether that's Donald Trump, whether that's parents going to school board meetings, whether that's Catholics attending mass, by the way, which I am, right?
And
number 4, yeah, exactly. Number 4, and this will be controversial, but I think it's common sense. We have to stop all federal judicial appointments until after the 2024 election. Biden and the lunatics that are running our administration right now are going to put in the most radical federal judges. And nobody knows this more than you, Kimberly. These people are lifetime appointments. So let's pause all judicial appointments. Very scary. And number 5, let's support Senator J.D. Vance. As you know, he's endorsed me in this race. Let's support his initiative. No more DOJ appointments or promotions until the weaponization of this justice system is over. Those are 5 common sense things that we got to get done.
Very important and salient points that need to be accomplished, and it's actually a solution. It's what's one of the many things that I love about you. You're very solution oriented. You come up with ideas. You have a plan and means to be able to implement them. Yeah, I love JD's a great friend of ours as well, and I think it's really a testament to your candidacy and your qualifications and your character that he has, endorsed you and supports you. I mean, can you imagine if we were to be so lucky as a country, because you don't just serve Ohio, you serve as a United States Senator. If we could have both yourself, Senator Moreno, and Senator Vance, I think we'll be doing pretty well, and I think it's what the people of Ohio need and should demand to have. That's for sure.
Well, thank you, Kimberly. And I'm very optimistic. I believe that we will win this race. I think we're going to keep the House, win the Senate. I think our true president will be back in January of 2025, and we're going to get a lot done. As you know, we learned the lessons of 17 and 18, and this country is going to be sailing in a great direction of growth and prosperity. And by the time we hit the 250th anniversary of the greatest country in the history of mankind, we will be on the right track, which is January 26th. All your listeners should know that. Be optimistic, but it's not going to be easy. We got to fight hard, and we got to get involved.
You're absolutely right. Be optimistic. Be filled with the faith and grace of God that better days are ahead, especially when we work together. And I know you'll work hard to fight and to protect Catholics who are also being targeted by the DOJ, if you can believe this insanity going on in the country. But I'll tell you one thing for sure. The momentum for your candidacy and your whole campaign in Ohio is, growing by the day. Where can voters go to learn more about the man that I know and proud to call my friend, Bernie Moreno?
Well, thank you, Kimberly. They can go on my website, Bernie Moreno, Moreno.com. Follow me on Twitter at Bernie Moreno, on True Social, Getter, Facebook, Instagram. That's me putting those posts on there. I don't have a staff of people who do this. I'm not a politician. These are my thoughts. If they can go on the website and throw in a contribution, that's extremely valuable and meaningful. We want to build a grassroots momentum. We were the #1 fundraiser in the GOP last quarter in the country of a non-incumbent. We want to keep that momentum going. So thank you for your support.
Yes.
Thank you for allowing me to talk to your great listeners. And thank you for allowing me to call you and Don Jr. friends.
Absolutely. God bless. And to your family and the baby on the way, your grandbaby, Bernie Moreno. Thank you so much for being on the program. We're looking forward to the great things you will accomplish in the future.
Thank you.
Take care. And my closing remarks just ahead. But first, I want to thank another amazing sponsor, because without him, we wouldn't have this show, okay? So don't forget about Patriot Mobile, because with Patriot Mobile, you put America first with every call, all while getting the same nationwide coverage as all the major carriers. No disadvantage, only benefits. Patriot Mobile provides you dependable wireless service at enough, mobilizing freedom and supporting you. So for free activation, go to patriotmobile.com/KG. That's patriotmobile.com/KG. All right, activate for free. And I also want to live. All right, we're going to go to the live chat. The show has flown by to see if there's some questions, comments, anything like that. Drew?
Well, a lot of good reaction to certainly our first segment. A lot of comments. Gabby Rios 59, Buddy 628. Many just talking about reflecting 22 years later and sort of what that means and sort of how you were able to bring perspective to it.
It really kind of, when you thought about it, you can tell like Sean Parnell and Mark Geis were sort of like taken aback, reflecting on the fact that it's been, and you probably feel that way too, 22 years. It doesn't even seem possible that it was 22 years ago, marking, 9/11 terrorist attacks. And wow, but we still have never forgotten as a country, and that's why I think it was really important to have on Sean Parnell, Army Ranger veteran, and Benghazi hero, my guys, to kind of put it into perspective and talk about that, and also the nexus between the two events and why we still need to remain ever vigilant in protecting this country from threats, foreign and domestic, quite frankly. And so with that, I'll say I really appreciate you all spending time on this important day, this tough day for the country, and I'm glad we could spend it together. So in closing, we can never forget the anger and agony of the September 11 terror attacks against our great nation. So today, I encourage you to say a prayer for the victims and their families, and to honor the heroism of so many in the face of an unimaginable act of evil. And we can honor the legacy of all of them by living a life centered around purpose, patriotism, and service. In the wake of tragedy, we often see the greatest acts of selflessness, resilience, and ingenuity. And we work towards building a better future for ourselves and for our families. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on such an important show. Please be sure to like and subscribe to my channel at Kimberly Guilfoyle and Don Jr.'s. Turn on notifications, download the Rumble app, and tell all of your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And also be sure to follow me across all platforms, X, formerly known as Twitter, Truth Social, Facebook, and Instagram. And don't miss Don Jr.'s big show at 6 p.m. with congressional candidate and Army Green Beret veteran, Joe Kent. It's going to be a fantastic show. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Enjoy it, hug your loved ones, say a prayer, be thankful that we're all Americans, and think about what you can do to make a difference for this country.